Witches were perceived as evil beings by early Christians in Europe, inspiring the iconic Halloween figure. Throughout history, there have been many different depictions of witches, from ominous, wart-nosed ladies huddled over a boiling pot of liquid, to hag-faced, snarling creatures flying through the air on brooms with pointed hats. Pop culture depictions of witches include a kind, twitchy suburban housewife, an awkward adolescent discovering her abilities, and a group of 3 enchanted sisters fighting evil. But the actual history of witches is gloomy and frequently fatal for the witches themselves. The origin of witches. Witchcraft was practiced by early witches who invoked spirits for assistance or to effect change through magic spells. The majority of witches were believed to be pagan witches working for Satan. Nonetheless, a lot of them were just naturally gifted healers or so-called wise women whose career choice was misinterpreted. Although the exact historical period of witchcraft is unknown, one of the earliest known accounts of witchcraft is found in the Bible's book of 1 Samuel, which is thought to have been written between 931 and 721 BC. It describes how King Saul went to the witch of Endor in order to call upon the spirit of the deceased prophet Samuel in order to aid him in defeating the army of the Philistines. The witch roused Samuel, who then prophesied the death of Saul and his sons. The next day, according to the Bible, Saul's sons died in battle, and Saul committed suicide. Other Old Testament verses condemn witches, such as the oft-cited Exodus 22:18, which says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Additional biblical passages caution against divination, chanting, or using witches to contact the dead. Malleus Maleficarum. During the mid-1400s, when many accused witches confessed to a variety of wicked behaviors, frequently under torture, witch hysteria really took hold in Europe. Within a century, witch hunts were widespread, and the majority of those found guilty were burned at the stake or hanged. Widows, single women, and other marginalized women were the targets of particular abuse. In Europe, up to 80,000 suspected witches were executed between 1500 and 1660. Approximately 80% of them were believed to be lust-filled, devil-possessed women. Ireland had the lowest rate of executions for witchcraft, while Germany had the highest. Witch fever most likely began to spread after 2 well-known German Dominicans published Malleus Maleficarum in 1486. Generally translated as The Hammer of Witches, the book served as a basic manual for locating, pursuing, and questioning witches. After declaring witchcraft to be heresy, Malleus Maleficarum swiftly rose to prominence as the authoritative work for Protestants and Catholics attempting to root out witches residing among them. Except for the Bible, no other book in Europe sold as many copies of this one for more than a century. Salem witch trials. Witch hysteria increased in the New World, which was still suffering from smallpox, French and British wars, and constant fear of attacks by nearby Native American tribes, while it declined in Europe. It was easy to find someone to blame for the tense atmosphere. The witch trials that are most likely most well known occurred in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. The Salem witch trials began when 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams began suffering from fits, body contortions, and uncontrolled screaming. Today, it is believed that they were poisoned by a fungus that caused spasms and delusions. As more young women began to exhibit symptoms, mass hysteria ensued, and 3 women were accused of witchcraft: Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, an enslaved woman owned by Parris's father. Tituba confessed to being a witch and began accusing others of using black magic. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop became the first accused witch to be put to death during the Salem witch trials when she was hanged at the Salem gallows. Ultimately, around 150 people were accused and 18 were put to death. Women weren't the only victims of the Salem witch trials. 6 men were also convicted and executed. Massachusetts wasn't the first of the 13 colonies to obsess about witches, though. In Windsor, Connecticut in 1647, Asa Young was the first person in America executed for witchcraft. Before Connecticut's final witch trial took place in 1697, 46 people were accused of witchcraft in that state, and 11 were put to death for the crime. In Virginia, people were less frantic about witches. In fact, in Lower Norfolk County in 1655, a law was passed making it a crime to falsely accuse someone of witchcraft. Still, witchcraft was a concern. About 24 witch trials, mostly of women, took place in Virginia between 1626 and 1730. None of the accused were executed. Are witches real? Grace Sherwood is one of the most well-known witches in Virginia history. Her neighbors claimed she hexed their cotton and killed their pigs. Sherwood faced more charges and was put on trial in 1706. In order to decide whether she was guilty or innocent, the court chose to employ a contentious water test. Sherwood was thrown into a body of water while having her arms and legs restrained. It was believed that she was guilty if she floated and innocent if she sank. Sherwood was found guilty of witchcraft despite not sinking. Instead of being killed, she was sentenced to 8 years in prison. A satirical article about a witch trial in New Jersey was published in 1730 in the Pennsylvania Gazette. It brought to light the ridiculousness of some witchcraft accusations. It wasn't long before witch mania died down in the New World, and laws were passed to help protect people from being wrongly accused and convicted. Book of Shadows. Modern-day witches of the Western world still struggle to shake their historical stereotype. Most practice Wicca, an official religion in the United States and Canada. Wiccans avoid evil and the appearance of evil at all costs. Their motto is to harm none, and they strive to live a peaceful, tolerant, and balanced life in tune with nature and humanity. Although many witches still practice today, witchcraft rarely has a sinister undertone. Their incantations and spells, which are comparable to other religions' prayers, are frequently taken from their Book of Shadows, a compilation of witchcraft and wisdom from the 20th century. A contemporary witchcraft potion is probably more likely to be a herbal flu remedy than a malicious hex. Witchcraft spells of today are typically used to prevent evil deeds or self-harm. Ironically, many historical witches may have accepted witchcraft for healing or protection against the immorality they were accused of, even though it's likely that some of them employed it for evil. However, witches still face persecution and death, whether they are real or accused. Since 2010, a number of men and women in Papua New Guinea have been killed by beatings and suspected of being witches. One such victim was a young mother who was burned alive. Incidents of violence against individuals suspected of being witches have happened in the Middle East, Africa, South America, and immigrant communities in Europe and the US.